Well, it's all there, isn't it?
It's 1 a.m. You're half asleep on the couch. The TV is doing that late night, I'm not even picking channels anymore, I'm just drifting thing. And then, bam, you land on a black and white sitcom where everyone's wearing pearls to breakfast. And the biggest emergency is, like, a missing roast. And the strangest part? Your brain doesn't reject it. It just goes, yeah, sure, this is my life now. That feeling, accidentally falling into old TV like it's a warm blanket, didn't start with Nick at Nite. Nick at Nite perfected it. It branded it. It made it feel intentional. But retro TV blocks, those were already happening in the wild for years, in ways that were way messier, way weirder, and honestly kind of hilarious. Because before classic TV was a vibe, it was a solution. Stations had too many hours to fill, not enough money, and a constant fear that if the screen went dark, you'd go do something productive. So they grabbed whatever was cheap, familiar, and available, and that meant reruns. Lots of reruns. One night, you'd get I Love Lucy. The next night, it was the Andy Griffith Show. Then, a local station would slap a dramatic title on a random pile of old episodes. Comedy classics. And suddenly, you had a retro block, even if nobody used that phrase yet. So today, we're going back to the strange early days, when reruns were filler, when theme weeks were invented by exhausted programmers, when Superstations turned local schedules into national habits, and when retro TV wasn't a curated museum, it was a gloriously chaotic thrift store. Section 1. The Rerun Gold Rush, when old TV was just cheap TV. Retro TV started the least romantic way possible. Somebody needed to fill a time slot, and the budget was basically pocket-lint. In the early days, reruns weren't nostalgia content. They were inventory. A local station had daytime hours, after-school hours, late-night hours, hours upon hours where they needed something on screen. Original programming costs money. News costs money. Even game shows cost money. But reruns were the dollar menu. So stations loaded up on shows that were safe, familiar, and endlessly repeatable. I Love Lucy was perfect for this. Short episodes, broad comedy, and you could drop into it at any point without feeling lost. Same with the Andy Griffith Show. You didn't need an arc. You needed comfort. And if you missed an episode, don't worry. You'd see it again. Probably tomorrow. Possibly twice. This is where the weird magic happens. When you air something constantly, it stops being old. It becomes background tradition. The show isn't from the 50s or 60s anymore. It's just the thing that's on after school, or the thing that's on when dad falls asleep in the recliner. And stations learned a crucial lesson. Reruns weren't just cheap, they were dependable. People like dependable. People like routines. People like turning on the TV and already knowing what emotional temperature they're about to get. That's the real beginning of retro blocks. Not a grand plan, just a slow realization that the past could be scheduled like a habit. And once local stations figured that out, they didn't just air reruns. They started building identities out of them. Section 2. Independent stations built mini time machines, mostly by accident. If you grew up with an independent UHF station, you know the vibe. The big networks were doing their polished primetime thing, and your local indie station was basically a lovable pirate ship. They didn't have the resources to compete head-to-head, so they leaned into personality. And nothing created personality faster than a block. A stretch of time where the channel felt like it had a theme, even if that theme was basically, we own these tapes, and we're gonna use them. So you'd get an after-school run of something like the Brady Bunch, followed by the Munsters or Bewitched, because why not? Then later, maybe Happy Days slides in, and suddenly, your station has created a multi-decade sitcom universe that only exists because someone in programming said, this seems like it'll keep people from changing the channel. And the real trick was stripping. The same show, same time, every weekday. That's how a block becomes a ritual. You didn't set reminders. You didn't record it. You just knew that at a certain hour, your TV would gently herd you into the same familiar world. What's funny is how uncurated it often was. Today, retro blocks are marketed like a museum exhibit, the best of the best. Back then, it was more like, here's Gilligan's Island at 6, the Beverly Hillbillies at 6:30, and at 7 we're doing whatever else we own. But those routines shaped people. They trained audiences to think of older shows as a dependable nightly destination. And once that habit existed, it didn't matter why the station built the block. Viewers felt like the block was built for them, and sometimes the station didn't even rotate the lineup. They just repeated the same thing until it became part of your life. Section 3. Accidental Marathons. The same movie all week. Era. Before binge watching was a button you clicked, it was something the schedule did to you. Local stations figured out a sneaky trick. If you bought a movie package or had access to a handful of titles, you could stretch that content forever by repeating it. And if you repeated it enough, people didn't just watch it once. They watched it in pieces. You'd catch the beginning on Monday, the middle on Wednesday, the ending on Friday, and by the end of the week, you felt like you'd lived inside the movie, whether you wanted to or not. Stations even turned repetition into theme weeks, where a specific vibe dominated a chunk of the schedule. That helped train audiences to think, oh, the channel is doing a thing this week, even if the thing was just, we're running the same classics again because we can. For visuals, imagine a station pairing an old favorite sitcom like Leave It to Beaver with a nightly movie slot that repeats the same classic title like it's haunting the channel. That's the weird early DNA. Comfort TV plus repetition, turning randomness into routine. And once audiences got used to that routine, the next leap was obvious. What if your local station's quirky rerun habits suddenly went national? That's where Superstations enter the chat. Section 4. Superstations. When local reruns became a national habit. Superstations were like someone took a local TV station, strapped a rocket to it, and said, congratulations, now you're everyone's weird uncle. The idea was simple. A station that started locally could be distributed widely on cable, meaning viewers far outside the original city could suddenly watch that station's schedule. And what was on that schedule a lot of the time? Reruns. Glorious, non-stop reruns. So now, instead of retro TV being a regional experience, my town's channel always plays this, it became a shared national rhythm. A kid in one state and a night shift worker in another could both be seeing the same lineup. Gilligan's Island, The Flintstones, maybe the Andy Griffith Show again, because those titles were cable-friendly comfort food, and that changed everything. Because once reruns were national, the retro block stopped being just a local quirk. It became a cable expectation. It also made the schedule feel like a variety pack. You'd get sitcoms stacked like pancakes, then some random movie, then a sports rerun, then, somehow, more sitcoms. That unpredictability became part of the charm. The station didn't need to be elegant. It just needed to be always on and always familiar. This is where you can really picture the shift. Retro TV wasn't just something your grandparents watched. It was something you discovered while flipping through cable, because the channel was basically throwing classics at you in bulk. And once that was normal, viewers were trained to accept a specific late-night truth. TV after dark was the Wild West. Section 5. The tonal whiplash era. Sitcom, horror, wrestling. Early late-night TV was not curated. It was assembled. You could be laughing at a squeaky clean sitcom like The Donna Reed Show, and then, 2 clicks later, you're in a shadowy world of eerie anthology stories like The Twilight Zone. And then somehow, because the universe has a sense of humor, you land on pro wrestling where someone is yelling like they're trying to scare your furniture. That whiplash is a big part of what made the early days of retro blocks feel strange. There wasn't a clean boundary between classic TV and everything else. It was all mixed together in the late-night blender, because the goal wasn't elegance. The goal was to keep you watching. And it worked. Because late-night audiences weren't always looking for a carefully planned lineup. They wanted company. They wanted noise. They wanted something familiar enough to drift to, with just enough randomness to keep them from switching off completely. So shows like Bewitched or The Dick Van Dyke Show became perfect leave it on TV. Even if you weren't actively watching, it felt friendly. It felt safe. It felt like the channel was keeping you company while you did homework, folded laundry, or pretended you weren't falling asleep. But the messiness also created demand for something new. A retro experience that didn't feel like you were wandering through a maze at 2 a.m. People wanted the comfort without the chaos. And that's when blocks stopped being accidental and started being strategic, especially on cable, where something even weirder was happening. Sometimes channels literally shared the same space. Section 6. When blocks existed because channels literally shared space. Here's a weird piece of TV history. In early cable, not every channel was a 24/7 operation. Limited space and evolving distribution meant some services didn't run around the clock, so another service could take over during off hours. That's part of the backdrop for why Nick at Nite could even become a thing. Nickelodeon had evening hours that needed filling, and as cable evolved into full-time channels, that created openings, literal schedule real estate, where a new identity could be built. Then comes the big milestone. Nick at Nite launches in 1985 as a nightly block on Nickelodeon, built specifically to program the evening and overnight hours. And the first lineup tells you what the strategy was. Recognizable, older skewing comfort shows like Dennis the Menace and the Donna Reed Show, paired with a mix that still had a little late-night oddball energy. But here's the key difference. Nick at Nite wasn't just airing reruns. It was presenting them. It treated old TV like a curated experience instead of leftover scraps. The message wasn't, "This is what we could afford." The message was, "This is cool. This is a vibe. Welcome." And once someone proved you could brand nostalgia like that, retro TV stopped being an accident. It became a product. Section 7. The birth of nostalgia as a brand, not just reruns. Nick at Nite didn't invent old shows. It invented the feeling of old shows. The bumpers, the tone, the presentation. It made classic sitcoms feel like a club you were joining at night. It made old TV feel like greatest hits, not leftovers. That's why a show like The Donna Reed Show wasn't just a 1950s sitcom in that context. It became part of a nightly ritual. The branding gave it a spotlight, a frame, a sense that you were tuning into something intentionally nostalgic rather than randomly old. And once you brand something, you change how people watch it. Viewers weren't just stumbling into reruns anymore. They were showing up for a block. The block itself became the destination. This is the moment where retro TV transforms from thrift store chaos into a themed experience. Instead of whatever's cheap, it's here's a lineup that feels consistent. Instead of tonal whiplash, it's comfort. And that branding didn't just serve older viewers. It created new fans, people who didn't grow up with these shows, but adopted them because the presentation made them feel accessible. That's how Bewitched or The Andy Griffith Show could become your show, even if you were born decades after the pilot aired. But there's an underrated, totally unglamorous reason this worked so well. Because retro TV, even when branded beautifully, still depended on a handful of titles you'd see everywhere. Section 8. Why you kept seeing the same shows everywhere. Ever notice how certain shows felt unavoidable? Like no matter what station you watched, local reruns, cable, a late-night block, there they were again. That wasn't a conspiracy. It was math. The shows that dominated retro blocks tended to have three things going for them. First, they were broadly appealing. I Love Lucy works for almost anyone because the comedy is visual and universal. The Andy Griffith Show works because it's gentle and character-driven. Second, they were easy to program. Sitcoms are perfect for blocks because episodes are short, self-contained, and you can air them in any order without confusing casual viewers. And third, they had enough episodes to rerun without burning out instantly. A short-lived series might be beloved, but it can't fill months of daily slots without repeating constantly. Meanwhile, a classic sitcom with a deep episode library can sit in a schedule like a reliable brick. So stations and networks leaned hard on the dependable stuff. It wasn't just the best shows. It was the shows that were cheap enough, plentiful enough, and safe enough to keep audiences from channel flipping. That's why you'd see the same staples. Leave It to Beaver, The Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, pop up in different forms across different channels and eras. The industry wasn't trying to be repetitive. It was trying to be predictable. And viewers rewarded that predictability with loyalty. Because once a retro show becomes part of your routine, it stops being old TV and starts being my TV. Because by the time Nick at Nite arrived, the blueprint already existed. Nick at Nite didn't invent nostalgia. It just gave it a name tag and a theme song. Conclusion. So when people talk about Nick at Nite like it was the start of retro TV, it's more accurate to say it was the moment retro TV got a glow up. Before that, retro blocks were basically a happy accident. Stations needed cheap programming, so they reran classics like I Love Lucy and The Andy Griffith Show until those shows stopped feeling old and started feeling eternal. Independent stations stitched together mini time machines out of whatever they owned. The Brady Bunch here, Bewitched there, and viewers built routines around it without even realizing it. Then you got the truly weird stuff, accidental marathons and theme weeks that turned repetition into a strange kind of event TV. And once Superstations helped push local rerun culture national, everybody started sharing the same comfort shows. Like the country quietly agreed that Gilligan's Island should always be waiting somewhere on cable. Nick at Nite shows up in 1985 and does something smarter than just running reruns. It makes the reruns feel curated. It treats classic TV like a nighttime destination, not a leftover drawer. And that's the twist. Retro TV wasn't born from nostalgia. It was born from schedules. Nostalgia came later, after repetition turned these shows into habits. And after branding turned habits into a lifestyle. So I'll throw it to you. What was the first old show you remember watching, like it was your show? I Love Lucy, The Brady Bunch, Bewitched, something else? And be honest, did you pick it? Or did the TV pick it for you?